in this crowd.
Oh, I forgot the playlist.
Right, where's the playlist? I tell you,
I got mine.
you guys have a little low energy, I have to say. We gotta up our game here.
Still absorbing all conference committee.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are.
Stressful.
All right. Let's start with, oh, yeah. 673. Let's see what the heck they've done to this.
Okay. This is a Senate bill out of EEE. Budget and tax is secondary. It establishes a new program within MSDE to provide additional compensation. This is for non-public schools for educators who teach STEM classes for various purposes. Page 2 says what kind of the purpose of the program is. Beginning this next school year, an eligible teacher may receive additional compensation. There's participation requirements, application requirements. Page 4, it looks like EEE. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to do the reprint. EEE.
So this is establishing a program that doesn't exist.
It's
right?
correct. It's a new program.
It doesn't exist, but they took all the money out of it.
One of their amendments is striking. It came in with a mandated appropriation that was struck.
How much?
It was going to be $250,000.
Sounds like I need to have a conversation with the chair.
Okay.
Okay? So we will hold that. All right, let's do 541. This is an interesting situation we find ourselves in. Huh? I know you love the subject matter. This was we passed this bill 3-4 years ago. Or was that? This was wrong. The Senator Young, the mayor.
It was my bill, too.
Was it yours too? Huh. I don't remember you having anything to do with it.
Is that why you like it this year, Mr.
I do like it. I like it very much.
Check it out.
So, but I basically told the House that we weren't going to keep passing it every year. So I said, bring it over. And they brought it over. And they changed it from 5 machines per, I guess, organization.
Fraternity. Yes.
To 3. And I think that is acceptable with all the people who are interested in this. Is that the only change?
They made some other technical changes, but yes, that's the most significant change.
Okay, so this would be, we would be, well, it is the House bill, so we'll take, I would suggest that we could take it as it is.
I just want to make sure that they had the 3. I think I have an amendment from the House sponsor to change it to 3 in the House bill.
Okay?
And then for the Senate bill, I would conform it to the House bill.
Yep.
And Senator Lewis Young requested to be added on as a sponsor.
Okay. All right, so we'll amend the House bill to 3. We'll amend the Senate bill to conform and add Senator Lewis Young and Jackson and Stallings. And so this is to approve all of those actions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We could, but we won't. Yes. So we're gonna let you take it. No. Senator Lewis Young. The full circle. All right.
Bring them down, put them in the gallery.
Sure. Well, I want to do, all right, let's talk about 84.
Give me one moment. I am sorry.
Take your time. Make a call anyway. Hey, she was in the Transportation Alignment Act. Yeah. Yeah, let me see.
I'll never hear from any of them. I think every single year McFadden is here.
'84 requires the MDOT to take various actions, including conducting impact assessments and evaluations of the greenhouse emissions and vehicle miles traveled. They made several changes in the House to the bill. We do have MDOT here that can explain some of the changes, but the bill basically is regarding major highway expansion capacity programs. And it will make changes to the programs based on gas emissions. And it will allow for other things to come in to take the place of those cars or that are contributing to the emissions in order to cut some of the climate or align with climate control.
84.
84. House Bill 84, and there is a cross file.
Yes, sir.
So this is about vehicle emissions on our highways to climate on a global level. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Can I explain it?
Sure.
So it's about taking a holistic look at at the decisions our Department of Transportation is making with regard to highway projects that are big highway projects
Sure.
that are over $100 million.
I'm aware of those, yep.
So those are big highway projects, and it's not saying that they can't go forward. It is saying that they can go forward if they, after an assessment of what the greenhouse gas emissions are, that they then take that information and offer mitigating projects, things that can benefit rural areas and others, like walking paths, like bus rapid transit, like lots, like other kind of complete streets projects, things like that, that can help mitigate the effects of greenhouse gases. So it doesn't say that they can't go forward, but it does say that they then need to take a look at what are those other mitigating projects that can offset the greenhouse gases that are generated by those big projects, one. Two is that projects that are already in the queue and that have already been approved are exempt and are not covered by this. So there are a number of projects that are already underway that would not fall under this. Does not fall under it because it's MDTA, and MDTA is not covered by this bill.
Right, so, but I appreciate the explanation. Some of those additional things you're talking about, which all sound well and good, that's just gonna drive more costs and more of the likelihood that the project's not gonna move forward. And when you talk about the rural areas, like, we need our roads. That's just what it is, and I don't know, I'll leave it alone, but.
So two things too, state of good repair and safety projects are not covered in this. Those still go ahead, and maintenance projects, that's not covered by this. These are new projects and looking at it within the context of the whole CTP.
So this is your bill, right? Are we still in possession of it?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Bailey.
So, Mr. Chair, just a question based on the last communication. So one of the main projects we have in Southern Maryland that we're looking forward to is the replacement of the Thomas Johnson Bridge. And I am just curious, because that would be a replacement, how would this affect that as we move forward with, we've got it out for design and looking at that, but it's not been approved. How would this affect that, especially when we're looking at the money for a multi-million-dollar bridge project?
Yeah, let's have the transportation people come up.
Sure. Drew Morrison from the Maryland Department of Transportation. Thanks for the question. As Senator Heldman was speaking to, the threshold has to do with capacity expansion. So if the decision in replacing the Thomas Johnson Bridge were to widen the bridge to add additional lanes, then the provisions of the bill related to major capital projects, assuming that project would be more than $100 million, would apply to that replacement project because of the capacity expansion, not because of the replacement components.
So, right now, we can't get, the traffic's backed up for, 4 or 5 miles on each way to get over a single lane bridge every afternoon. And so obviously, as you well know, that bridge is going to cost over $100 million, probably about $700 million. So what is the estimate that you would have that this would create additional expense to a $700 million project and a delay in us being able to get to that project? As you well know, if you've been in a boat underneath there, you go by the pilings and you can swim in the cracks, that are holding the bridge up.
Yeah, so the first thing that would need to happen would be a greenhouse gas emission analysis to determine what is the net impact. And there's a little bit of science and discussion to that analysis, because when you do have congestion, right, that sort of point emission is severe there, and then when cars start moving, we start seeing, lower emission in that area. The challenge is the question of whether, that traffic comes back. So there'd be analysis that would need to be done to determine whether there's a negative or a positive impact overall on the emissions, and that would determine whether the mitigation requirements would apply. In talking, with the sponsors, our understanding is that they agree that any sort of mitigation activities that would be needed if there were a negative greenhouse gas emission analysis would just need to sort of have a down payment, not that everything would need to be funded and complete on the same time frame as the core project itself, but that there would be some progress toward whatever mitigative activities are needed, so that, to your point, a critical project that needs to move forward could proceed to do so while that parallel program is advancing on a schedule that makes sense for it as well.
So how much money, if we said that bridge was going to be 700 million, how much money would a project, would we have to figure in to do this?
Unfortunately, Senator, I wouldn't be able to give you a figure.
So we don't know how much this is going to add to a project, but yet we say, well, this is a good idea to do this, when we have no idea. I mean, this could put projects like this that are critical for our area completely out of financial reach.
Understood. And in working with the work group that the sponsors convened on this legislation in the interim, we sought to identify a number of possible strategies that start within the corridor to statewide investments that could create sort of a strong menu of activities that can allow projects to proceed, because there's a variety of choices for how those emissions, when we understand what they look like, could ultimately be mitigated.
Thank you.
So can you give some examples of what these mitigation plans are? I mean, you can't speak to the cost of them. I mean, I'm just going right to it. Interstate 81, we have to expand it. It's going to be expanded at some point to three lanes. Emissions will be higher. So according to this bill and this chart, it's going to cost us more. Probably not going to happen. So, I mean, explain to me what we're supposed to do there. I mean, how do we mitigate emissions on a highway in a rural area that there's no transit that can resolve this? There's no nothing. It is the second largest northern-south corridor in the country. But you're telling me that this bill is going to make it cost more and less likely for it to happen. So please explain that to me.
Yeah, so I think to clarify first, I-81 Phase 2, which is, funded in the governor's budget, is not subject to this
Phase
legislation.
2. You know how many more phases there are?
3, yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that apply to it?
So the projects that it would apply to would
Right.
be over $100 million.
So you're trying to sit here and tell me with a straight face, we're going to have a bridge that comes over the river, be 3 lanes for about 5 miles, and then after 5 miles, we're not going to do it anymore, because this is going to mitigate not mitigate, but you're telling me that there has to be some sort of mitigation plan to put in place for emissions. That makes no sense. Zero. I'm sorry, respectfully, but this is a terrible bill. Sorry. But please, I do want to hear your ideas of what we're going to do to mitigate emissions.
Sure. So in the legislation, it does identify this sort of cascading approach where you would look to, if the analysis concludes that GHG emissions would increase, that you would look.
They will definitely increase. You know that.
The
only reason they have to expand it is because it's already full. Like, be honest here.
So in the mitigation threshold.
I'm sorry.
I apologize.
Are these mitigation steps, are they required, and are they required at any certain level? Or is it just you've identified that's a problem, we think it's a good idea to do mitigation, but we're going to evaluate whether or not any mitigation steps can actually be done or not?
Sure. So the legislation, as amended by the House, does seek to offset whatever the aggregate greenhouse gas emission impact is with those mitigation activities. So that's the threshold is the goal is for those activities to result in, for these major projects, a sort of neutral outcome.
I guess. I think that's, I'm trying to understand.
But, I mean,
Senator, is it a requirement?
If there's a negative greenhouse gas impact, then yes, it would be required to offset those.
The full amount of the.
Of the sort of delta from the project,
Okay.
yes.
Senator Hedelman.
I'm just trying to find it exactly in the bill, but it does say that it is subject to the appropriations, right?
Yes, so ultimately, this analysis for these individual projects feeds into, in the bill, a larger CTP-wide analysis, which incorporates the sort of holistic set of investments that the department makes in transit. We have a solar initiative that's underway and that is supported in this budget, and sort of counts those things up. But yes, in that language, it says subject to appropriation. So the idea being that if in analyzing the CTP, it's concluded that the target there, which in the CTP is to meet the declining emission target that's within the carbon pollution reduction plan for transportation, if that threshold can't be met due to appropriation, then that is an off-ramp for the GHG reduction provisions of the legislation.
And isn't this also consistent with the governor's instructions to each of his agencies, including you all, for climate pollution reduction goals?
We engaged with the work group over the interim that was involved in, the drafting of the amended legislation, I think in large part because we are seeking to meet the goals of the Climate Solutions Now Act and meet what has to happen in the transportation emissions sector. We fully agree there's lots of implementation considerations that go into how you make a system like this work, which both Colorado and Minnesota have implemented similar approaches over the past few years. But the sort of crux of the bill is related to that need as a policy matter to address transportation emissions.
And also, didn't it resulted in quite a bit of savings in those states as well?
We've definitely, in our conversations with Colorado and Minnesota, they've worked a bit to fine tune. I wouldn't be able to speak to any particular savings, but know that it's helped them make choices around projects that they have felt to be beneficial.
And my understanding that there's been tens of millions of dollars saved, at least in Colorado. Well, they're different projects, but it has the Colorado's.
We're going to wait till we're recognized, Senator.
Anyway, and it can give examples of, changing some of those projects to address the needs. And Colorado is a similarly laid out state to us in that regard too. So thank you.
Senator King.
This is a bill I did not realize that I had voted for it last year, but I did vote for it. I have heard more about this bill than just about anything else in the last couple of months. And I have said this 1,000 times. I am not against transit. I understand all the environmental issues, but we need roads so badly. And this bill, from what they're telling me, will just about stop any of the big road projects that need to happen. We're falling so far behind because we're not keeping up with it, and I just can't support it this year. This is what it is.
Senator Zucker.
Thank you very much. I apologize, I've been distracted lately. I guess based on what Senator Quarterman was saying, so just walk me through this. So I guess my question is, will road projects be delayed?
It would not be our intention as a product of this legislation to delay a road project that makes sense for the variety of policy issues why we pursue a capacity expansion project. It would require us to evaluate what the greenhouse gas emission impacts are. That's something we do evaluate under the current Federal Highway Administration NEPA guidance. And then it would, if there is a negative greenhouse gas emission impact, to offset that. But I think from the department's perspective, we would continue to evaluate projects holistically in terms of the range of public policy objectives that they achieve in determining whether to proceed with a project.
What's the turnaround time for you all to, so say, for instance, you have a project that's been in the mix for a while and it's going to the second phase and you need to analyze the impact. How quickly can that be turned around?
So a lot we'll have to do is because any project that has a completed NEPA review is exempted from the project. It would be done within the context of that larger environmental review. And that time frame is sort of set by what that environmental review looks like. An environmental assessment, which is a lower level today, where we're generally staying within the right-of-way. We still could be widening, but we're not having major impacts to environmental resources. That today is supposed to take 1 year after you start the clock. Usually they take a little longer than that, but formally 1 year. And then a NEPA document under the current guidance, an environmental impact statement, which is the larger document, is again supposed to take 2 years under the current process. It sometimes takes a little bit more. So our sense for projects such as that is that analysis required by the legislation, because all of these are federally funded, so we're going to be going through that NEPA process, would be incorporated into that approach. There could be projects, in the middle where there would be, a few months to do the analysis, but generally I think we would expect the core work here to be during that NEPA process that would be done for the project.
And then if there's, given all the dysfunction in DC, if there's any changes in the federal government posture, how does that either help or hurt us?
Sure. Well, I think that it always comes to the same conversation when there's a change in federal posture. Are there things that the federal government, since we receive substantial aid from the federal government, where we have to amend what we do in order to receive federal funds? And then there are times when we make choices based on state policy that are still permissible under the federal rules, where we may be going more one direction than the federal government would have. So like a lot that's happening at the federal level, I think we would have to see, and we would certainly advise folks if a state policy is causing any concern from a federal standpoint and how we seek to move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You were saying earlier that this is something that you already looked into and talked about before this bill came into place, right? Like you had the conversations about doing something like this and putting it in place.
So under some of the more recent NEPA reviews that we've done based on FHWA guidance that came out during the Biden administration, we incorporated greenhouse gas emission analysis because that was sort of added to the federal requirement for highway projects. So there are a couple of projects where we've started to do that as a result of that requirement.
So you're saying yes?
Yes.
So, okay. So knowing that and knowing that there have been past projects that have already been in place in other states, and kind of knowing that and that being in place, why couldn't we already have that in place in the state of Maryland, knowing that these things that you're going to be looking into for highways, for bridges, or for anything else, why is the time frame so long when you're, as the good senator said, there's phases in some of the jobs, and knowing the time frame and how important it is in some of our areas, that they're really priority. Why can't we move a lot faster? What is the problem there?
Sure. I think, overall within, and maybe this speaks to the larger sort of environmental review process versus, the specific provisions here. The major drivers of delay from an environmental review standpoint are coordination, whether that's with federal agencies and aligning on the impacts, whether that's with local jurisdictions and making sure, the alignment here or there aligns with local interests. So I think the point to Senator Zucker was that analysis required here we would seek to incorporate it into sort of the existing timeframes of project development we have. But happy to talk more here and offline about how we can continue to speed up the work we do on the environmental review basis.
One more question. what's the average time frame for an area that you would say to be, I don't know, 5 miles long, and you're saying you're doing all this work? What's the kind of time frame that you're going to say that you need this kind of analysis?
So again, assuming it's over $100 million and that, the time frame of this particular activity is really driven by the nature of the impacts. If it's very modest, then it's less work. I think the specific technical activity here of modeling what the greenhouse gas emission impacts are is not that long. It's not that full 1 year, 2 year. It's just it tends to fit within a particular process where we're reviewing the project. So I would think that to get the answer, it's a couple month exercise incorporated within a larger exercise of environmental and review and project development.
And just one more thing. So there should be examples. I mean, you've done this work. They're in place. I would think you have some type of examples that you could say, this is the area where we worked. This is a time frame that we've had, and this is why this is going to take this long. And we have other ones that are going to be longer. We should have that. That's the part I don't understand why. We have things that have already been done. You've done this already, but we don't have anything in writing or anything like that, which would be a help.
Sure, we'd be happy to follow up with the committee on that front.
Thank you. Senator Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to get your perspective on this, because I see this as a complete roadblock to the Thomas Johnson Bridge and us moving that forward. As you all know, I've had your secretary down there. We've looked at this for the last 10 years. I think it's been over 10 years, has been the #1 project from the Tri-County Council trying to move forward with that. How putting this added issue, two parts, how does it not add a significant amount of time to it? And the other thing is, with the, as you well know, the 3 or 4 mile backup on each side of this bridge every day, all those cars sitting there for over half an hour, just sitting there going one car at a time. What is that, how is that going to change the greenhouse gas of them just sitting there running, or if they were over a bridge, everybody moving?
Sure. And so, I think the department's role within the work group and within, the legislation that the sponsors put forward has been to seek to make a system and a process work within the world of Maryland transportation. This is something that's been done in Colorado and in Minnesota. And so we have been trying to think about how can we incorporate the decision making, the analysis that's needed into the processes we have, which I think everyone would agree. We'd love for them to be quicker, but at the very least our goal would be to incorporate into the timeframes that we have today. I think the department is still committed to projects that can address capacity needs throughout the state and would seek to, then address what impacts, would come from them. So I think that our intention would be to incorporate this into timeframes that exist. The analysis question you asked is a very important one that we're happy to talk more is should the bill move forward on how the different pieces come together. But there is both a benefit there's a greenhouse gas benefit from people starting to move who are otherwise sitting. And then there's a question of, over time, does some of that benefit get reduced by changes in land use? That road fills up over time. And so the question of how to analyze that is, I think, one of the questions that the bill puts to the department to refine. And so there is definitely a benefit from moving people, but then there's a question of what the long-term consequences.
Okay, last question. With all this going forward, right, if it does, from the department's perspective, have you all at all looked at any type of situation analysis, anything about a ferry system for us? Because if, that's going to be the only alternative if the price gets raised anymore on this bridge.
I think one thing that would happen as part of, if environmental analysis is advanced on the Thomas Johnson Bridge beyond the current level where it is, it would go through an alternatives process that's required under NEPA. We have had in other contexts, ferry system, for example, on the Bay Bridge crossing Tier 1 analysis, we did look at ferry options as part of an alternative. So I think, Senator, independent of this legislation, we're happy to keep talking with you about what alternatives may be for the bridge and to address the need that you and others have identified there.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you, gentlemen. I'm connected to a lot of these areas as well. Question for you. So the climate study versus the the construction of a new roadway. Have you all ever considered operating on a parallel track? I mean, so slowing down matters because of a climate study versus doing a parallel track. You do the roadway, you do everything you typically do with that, while at the same time you're doing the climate, and if you need to shift or slow down a portion of the project, then the community is notified that this is what we're doing, but at the same time, they can see progress on what they're doing. And you're satisfying what this legislation is trying to get to and what the needs are of the community.
It's a good question. I think the legislation as, amended by the House has one parallel track piece, which goes to this mitigation question, which is that it is likely the case that the core project, the highway widening, is further along than whatever these mitigations might be. And in speaking, with the sponsor, I think there's a shared understanding, because this would be important for the department, that package, not far enough along, would be able to move forward maybe at a slower pace because it's just not there. In terms of the analysis itself, the structure of this legislation is that we would need to do the analysis before funding construction of the project. And I think that goes to the intent to analyze and understand what that impact would be before the project proceeds. But we're happy to engage on with the best approach to advancing this issue. But that's how the legislation is structured.
So I appreciate that, and we are in the process of dealing with the legislation, right? From your expertise and the fact that the current piece of legislation has a parallel track component, how about considering how to expand that parallel track component? Look, it's, everything we do is in cycles, 4-year cycles, quite frankly. And to continue to start over, I mean, it's just, if you look at the entire budget and IRFA, I mean, we have some serious transportation challenges, as you all know.
Yes.
And the key is, how do we, take steps in to resolution while keeping folks in the loop. So I think that's probably more of a statement than anything else. But I happen to know that how frustrated every one of our members are all across the state. So I would certainly like to see some sort of thought on how expansive we could be with a parallel track approach as we're moving along. So, any ideas certainly are welcome, and we hope that you all welcome any ideas that come up as well. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make the point, because what I heard you respond to Senator Zucker's comment and then others as follow-ups was that there really would not be substantial delay in the review of these projects, since they're such large projects anyway and have to go through the NEPA process, which takes what it takes, and that it would be done concurrently. Is that correct?
It's certainly our intention to try to seek to incorporate this activity into the NEPA and design and planning activities that happen on the way from an idea to implementation.
Okay, and the follow-up second slightly different is you guys are already looking at multimodal options in your planning process overall, correct? Is that correct? To reduce fatalities, to provide other safe options, since there are so many accidents on the roadways that are taking the lives of our citizens here?
It is, I'm sorry.
No. Just to improve safety, to improve, this is about, it's certainly about the environmental impacts, but it's about providing people options, which is what, a recent expansive survey has told us that they want, in addition to saving people money, since it is the second largest expense that our citizens have, with housing being the first, transportation being the second.
Sure, and it is the case, Senator, when we are looking at the major $100 million plus projects going forward, we are looking at multimodal strategies. If you look at the Bay Bridge project that MDTA, and obviously MDTA is not part of this legislation, but in their Bay Bridge study, they look at alternatives. In the American Legion Bridge 270 program, we have looked at what transit, and there's a pedestrian bicycle component to it. So it's something that when we're scoping and we're developing the purpose and need of a project, we do try to see what the range of opportunities are. That's something that's been a part of planning. People may remember the 270-15 multimodal study, the Capital Beltway multimodal study that resulted in the purple line. So we do try to look at a range of avenues to address the purpose and need when we're looking at a project.
Okay, and one other thing, because I was around here when we did the Nice Bridge, and how that project, did have a walk across that was supposed to be part of the original design of the project, correct? And that would be considered to be, one of the offsetting aspects of if we had something like this in place at that point in time.
Right. So the way that the legislation is structured is you sort of start with the project area and see if there are opportunities, and that can be things from pedestrian bicycle, transit. We are, as I mentioned earlier, have a pretty substantial solar initiative that we are seeking to embark on, and there can be opportunities for solar within our property and within our right-of-way. You start with that local lens, and then if that isn't viable because of the conditions on the ground, because of the rural nature of the area, the legislation permits you to take more of a statewide look. And we think that would integrate with the larger investments we make within the CTP of, where are there investments that we make statewide that can sort of form a bank, if you will, for the offsets that may be required to continue to meet the Climate Solution Now Act transportation emission goals.
So you would start to gather, and perhaps you already have started to kind of bank those kinds of mitigating projects. And obviously it depends, because you want to try and be as local as you can. And then if that is not appropriate in that particular project, you'd go out.
Right. The legislation is structured to start nearby and broaden, and so that would be the approach we would take.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I appreciate some of the clarification. Would not be substantial delays, would not be our intention. But the reality is, yeah, that's the goal. But that's not what's going to happen. You're adding more burdens to projects already that are overburdened and not happening. I asked you earlier, and I still didn't get an answer, and if I did, I apologize, but maybe I didn't hear you. Do you have examples of these mitigation plans? And so you're going to expand a major highway in a rural area that has no other option? Like, what are these mitigation plans, these additional costs that we're going to have? You're not putting a bike lane on Interstate 81. You're not putting a sidewalk. I appreciate the Nice Bridge thing. I think my understanding is that sidewalk path was cut because it cost too much, right?
It was, under the last administration, it was removed,
Yeah.
yes.
So what we're doing is we're adding additional costs to projects that already are underfunded and not happening, and they're now definitely not going to happen because they're going to be way too much. I'm just making sure I understand this right. And I appreciate my friend from Montgomery County who brought up the implications of the federal government, because those are real. And I think what we're going to see, unfortunately, or however you want to describe it, is going to be less funding from the federal government in transit and more towards roads, and this is just going to end up, again, penalizing those road projects. And so I don't understand it. I do have one more question of, when you talk about vehicle miles per capita, and if I'm reading this right, it talks about the total number of miles in a geographic area over a 1-year period divided by the population. So how does that benefit rural areas that have major highways that go through there? They're not our cars. Someone heard talk about 5 miles, and Interstate 81's 12 miles. Everyone who goes through there, most of them aren't from Maryland. They're coming from north-south. 40% of it's truck traffic, okay? So how does that help us? How does 95 in the northern area? You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do. And that was a very healthy discussion among the members of the work group that we participated in about the role of vehicle miles traveled within this question of greenhouse gas emission reduction. So within the climate pollution reduction plans, there's a overall greenhouse gas emission reduction goal. And the sense within the transportation sector is that that goal will be met basically in 2 ways overall statewide. One is by the greening of the fleet. Over time, people will buy greener cars, they'll buy electric cars, we'll encourage that, and that part will go down. And then the other part is while you're working your way down the curve, not everyone's going to buy an electric car tomorrow. I'm still on my 13-year-old Honda Civic. I'm going to try to keep it around until it dies. But the other piece then is to reduce over time how much people are driving, where people have the option to reduce their driving. And so there's a need to meet that overall goal in the time frame set by the legislature in terms of the Climate Solutions Now Act to make progress both in terms of electrification and in terms of overall driving. But within the context of the bill as amended, the move was definitely to move away from VMT as the mechanism to looking more broadly at the greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. So while we do look at VMT and trying to reduce that over time, which reduces wear and tear on our roads and gets more people into options when they can have it, we recognize that that's not the only vehicle by which you're going to achieve those greenhouse gas reduction goals. And so in working through the legislation, we've been focused on that big target, which for some areas will mean reduction in miles traveled, but in some areas that will be much harder for the very real reasons that you mentioned.
I appreciate it because that's probably the most honest thing you said there at the end. It's not going to happen. In a rural area, again, as 40% of the traffic is truck traffic, tractor trailers. They're not getting electrified anytime soon. I mean, there's some technology out there and they're starting to. I mean, they built some even actually in Hagerstown, but like that will never meet any greenhouse goal that anyone puts in out here. It's unachievable, it's unworkable, and we'll just have to fundamentally disagree. So, thank you.
Oh, no, I was going to say, given the time frame, it sounds like this is ongoing. I would just say let's hold it and discuss it more later.
34. We did Senate Bill 295. It's the one where the comptroller is creating a program to make sure that folks aren't penalized with interest and things of that nature if they're incarcerated. I forgot the bill was over here. Passed out here 41-0.
Love that bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And it's just conforming the House bill to the Senate.
Great.
Sorry,
House
House Bill 634.
You got to
Did we have something else we had to get, Con?
No, but I just want to think about when to go tomorrow.
We'll probably do again after we have, so we have conference at 2:30 again tomorrow. So we'll try to do it after that. Okay?